With Andrew Berry making the move for Zadarius Smith over the weekend, this begs the question for Cleveland Browns fans, is Andrew Berry done yet? And if he's not done yet, what exact position would Andrew Berry be targeting? We're going to break it all down next on your latest Locked on Browns.
You are Locked on Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LLB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Look, 8th season Browns coverage, been here since 2017. So you may not always agree with my opinions, but obviously, I would say they carry maybe a little bit of weight. If joined here today, Browns Digest, Pete Smith. We're going to break it down. Appreciate all the everydayers who make Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Make sure you subscribe like they are on YouTube. Notifications on, so when the content drops, you guys are there to consume it. Locked On Browns, always available, always free, wherever you get your audio podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. It's beginning a new week here at Locked On Browns. Obviously, a lot of buzz over the weekend. The Browns make the move for Zadarius Smith. So, we've covered that, but it certainly begs some questions. But segment 3, we didn't get to it yet. We will get to it. Our thoughts on the Steelers 2023 draft class. Segment 2, if there's another move to be made, the question is, what positional group probably needs it the most? You'll get my thoughts. You'll get Pete's thoughts as we continue that conversation in segment 2. But the burning question would be, and today a couple of roster moves, for the Browns. We're at 91 with bringing Zadarius Smith in. You move on from defensive tackle Perry. You move on from linebacker Story Jackson. Browns looking at 89, where are they looking? Obviously, there were some XFL players they had some interest in. Maybe the pass rusher is going to be out of the mix now. There was another corner they had interest in. But we're not really talking maybe those type of moves here. We're talking maybe one more big move. So, Pete, the question would be, and look, with the draft assets they have, they're totally sustainable to get you a player like they did with Zadarius Smith. So the question is Andrew Berry, has it been last call essentially yet for Andrew Berry trick-or-treating, or is he still out circling the block trying to score one more?
He better not be done. I mean, it's May 15th. It's insane. Beyond that, they've got things they need to do. And I get asked all the time about like free agents and stuff that are still out there. There are a ton, not necessarily at the positions the Browns are looking at, but just in general, like corners and some of these other positions where there's just a lot of guys just hanging out. Like Jarvis Landry's still hanging out, for example. There's a lot of players. You can make a pretty good, I wouldn't say full team, but I would say there's a lot of players to be added. Isaiah Wynn's a good example that was just signed by the Miami Dolphins. Like that could be a very big move for them. Defensive tackle is not done. It can't be done. Running back shouldn't be done. And then you just never know when a phone's going to ring and somebody comes available or a team releases somebody. Dalvin Cook decides, hey, I'd like to play for practically free. And you're just like, okay. So look, the Browns are a improving team, but there were a lot of people who suggested the Browns were done before they they're traded for Zadarius Smith and are very happy to have him now. So the Browns are greedy and they should be greedy.
And it's the only way you can be here. We covered this when we talked about, Zadarius Smith is, it's the theory of no stone unturned, no phone call ignored, every phone call returned. You're not doing your job. You're not doing your due diligence. You're not doing the best of your contract that is given to you by the owner of improving this roster. You're always tinkering. You're always looking for ways to improve. But it looks like some positional groups obviously would be really, really tough to foresee something happen there. I know I got a tweet today about the safety position. And, I'm not going to say Ronnie Hickman's a roster lock by any means whatsoever. I would say that I do think Ronnie Hickman, it would be a bigger surprise if he didn't make this team than if he did make this team. Absolutely. It's the opportunity is his. Just, essentially don't blow it, kid. But you look at it and you get to it, and we'll get to, I think what I think is the biggest need here. And maybe we'll go here, we'll park this part in here, Pete. But you get it. I get it. What about the linebackers? What about this, and there's some blatant spots where you think it's maybe just not in the cards here, like the linebacker position. And this has been the mantra to this point, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, Pete. To some people, to some fans, it feels like it's being ignored. But when you put limited resources into it, every year to this point, and I would say maybe last year, you could probably have the conversation, did you really get out what you put in monetarily? But every year, for what they've put into the linebacker room, they've gotten the return.
Anthony Walker is a good linebacker.
We don't know how much he's going to get back. That's the only question with Anthony Walker.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a talented linebacker who's very good in 2021. Sione Takitaki was a good linebacker last year, and obviously he's
conceivably Takitaki was the best linebacker last year.
Yeah, well, either way, I mean, he certainly opened some eyes in terms of what he can be. Like, there's this talk of like, well, who should be the long-term? The Browns need to draft the long-term Mike linebacker. Might be already here. Might be Sione Takitaki when he's assuming he comes back healthy from his knee. You got more out of Tony Fields than I think a lot of people were expecting. He won a game. They got Jordan Kunazik. They got like Reggie Ragland showed up and like made plays. It's unless you're getting the top guys like Bobby Wagner or Levante David, it's just such a correlative position because your defensive line is just such an important element there. And the Browns have been awful at defensive line and particularly the interior for 2 years. And it's just killed linebackers. You're going to get, if you take care of business, and Dalvin Tomlinson is a huge step in that direction. And Siaki Ika could be helpful in that element. It's going to allow those guys to fly around, play downhill, and make plays. And you saw that with JOK as a rookie. But when they have to take on blocks or get shielded off or getting contacted and a back or somebody's running fast, it's much harder to tackle them when you're trying to catch as opposed to meet them at a point, make a tackle. And the example I will point to is the San Francisco 49ers have the best linebackers in football. Against the Philadelphia Eagles, they looked like garbage because the line of the Eagles was able to get down the field and just cut guys off. Like Drain Greenlaw looked like a bum in that game. He's a really talented player, but he can't go through 300-pound guys. And the Eagles just made them look awful in that game. It's just because you have to have those dudes up front take care of business. And that didn't happen at that game. If the Browns can take care of that part, the linebacker play will improve immensely. Not only that, it'll improve the safety position because they don't feel like they have to be such a massive part of the run game, even though I think Jim Schwartz is going to play a little more of a box safety type guy. But just in general, defensive line is going to improve everybody else and make that whole defense function better.
And, the other thing is, with, the questions of, bringing in a linebacker, the guys who would be an everyday linebacker, and look, the Browns obviously have linebackers who look like they're going to play early in, formation, early and down in distance and later and down in distance. The guys who can play every snap, those guys don't really necessarily aren't going to be available just now. But the old adage of keep your linebackers clean, and it makes it easier for them to not have to work through so much traffic. I mean, you see some of the simple blocks, but a 310-pound guard just leans in to the shoulder where you're trying to take all your momentum to. There is nothing you can do about it. We're going to switch it up here. We are going to get to what we think. And obviously names will flow here. What we think the biggest need is, if Andrew Berry can pull off here as far as, what this roster needs. And you see it, look, I don't know if today was the day where it seemed to come out, but apparently now the, national media is maybe starting to realize that maybe, they had slept on some of the work Andrew Berry has done. Of course, none of it means a hill of beans until you start winning some games. We'll keep it going here. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Whether it is your favorite time of the sports here, come on now, look, make a fast break to the FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. We've got Western Conference Finals, Eastern Conference Finals, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Look, you got one series left in the West, one series left in the East. One of the best things to do, sit down, same game parlay. You can pick 2, 3, 4 long shot bets, maybe put down $5-10. You got a chance at a decent payout. You got great promotions every day. The app is safe and secure, simple. You get your money, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, continuing to take you through here your latest episode of Locked On Browns. And, and I think that, Pete, this kind of becomes where people get insatiable. Obviously, you get the moves the Browns make. You get the trade after the draft, after we've met the UDFAs, and you go and you make a move here for a player like Zadarius Smith. Now it's the old, kind of the kid in the candy store. Well, what else can I get? How much more can I ask mom for? How much more can I ask dad for before they say no? But Pete, for me, and I think for you and for most everybody, it's glaring. I think you'd be almost, and we talk a lot about Andrew Berry and basically hedging your bets and doubling down, what they've done for Deshaun Watson this offseason, what they've done to this point for Jim Schwartz. It's trying to make sure an investment works here. And the Dalvin Tomlinson one, to this point, we're talking about a lot of the guys, whether it's Winfrey, obviously Elliott, all the holdovers there at the defensive tackle position, Ika, a rookie, again, drafted at the same range that all these other guys were. But if you're trying to do what you've done for other investments you've made onto this roster, you've got to get one more guy in this defensive tackle room. You got to get one more veteran here to hope you're getting every drop of Dalvin Tomlinson and every other investment you've made on this defensive side of the ball to this point.
Right. The guys that stand out to me are Matt Ioannidis and Shelby Harris, and they're different styles. Matt Ioannidis, more of a pass rusher, where Shelby Harris, more of a run stopper. And I'm starting to think, based on the Zadarius Smith acquisition, that maybe Shelby Harris is the better idea, just to try to force teams to get to obvious passing situations and let those guys fly around. But you need a starting caliber 3, because the situation you want to be in is, 1, you don't want to be in a situation like you've been the last 2 years where you don't have anyone. And then 2, you want to be in a spot where, whether it's Perrion Winfrey, whether it's Jordan Elliott, whether it's Maurice Hurst, you want those guys being somebody you get as an extra, not as somebody you need to start. Because that's where they've been. We did this. We watched this happen last year, where they just had guys that they were hoping to figure it out. I think deep down they knew they were sort of in trouble. I just don't think they knew quite how bad it was going to be. We're hoping some of these guys would step up, take advantage of the opportunity. And it didn't happen. So you don't then go, well, I guess we'll just let them figure it out again. You have to take that spot and get it done. And I assume they will. What I assume is going to happen is they obviously did this Zadarius Smith deal, and there was talk that if that wasn't going to happen, they were going to get Melvin Ingram. Whether it's in the next couple of days or a couple of weeks, at some point Myles Garrett's contract's going to get restructured. It made sense to do this anyway, like just as a matter of building cap space for the future to keep sort of building this thing up even more and more. And then that's going to allow you to sort of sign one of these guys. And look, the other part of this is, by getting Zadarius Smith, those guys should be lining up at your building going, I want to play here, because they're going to be the fourth guy who gets to feast on this. And like, those are two guys who have found themselves on good teams, like Shelby Harris when he was with the Broncos, or Matt Ioannidis, who started with Washington in that ridiculous defensive front and ended up in Carolina with a talented defensive front. Like, these are guys who have been very fortunate in where they've played. So like, by getting Zadarius Smith, I think you can get these guys to maybe bite on your price a little bit more because they can look at this and go, look, I'm not getting the number I want. But if I come here, one, I've got a shot to win something. And two, I'm probably going to ball out and I'm going to get into free agency again next year. And I'm going to have a better opportunity to cash in.
Yeah, because for some of these guys right now, look, the money, look, when you're talking, your agents are talking with teams, money seems to be same all around. And that's what it is. Now you're in the weird spot, where you're maybe waiting for somebody to get injured. That's a spot nobody absolutely ever wants to be in, obviously. But these are the situations. This is the way the business works. It's crooked. It's weird. It's sad. Nobody wants to be in it. But, at the end of the day, man, you're trying to feed your family, trying to do the best thing you can. So, that's the game that you essentially have to play in that regard. But there is the caveat that you're saying, Pete. It's like, all right, it's been long enough. All right, well, what's the best position for me? Because you know what? I was hoping for 2 years, 7.5. All right, maybe it's 1 year, 2.5, 1 year, 3. But if I go play and I'm part of the Cleveland Browns defensive line and I find a way and I total 6.5, 7 sacks, all of a sudden this 2 year, $7 million I was hoping for this year becomes a legit talking point for the following season. So that's what makes this that appealing. And, we talk about it all the time with Myles Garrett. You can put him anywhere you want on the defensive line. And it's just going to make everybody's job that much easier because he is always going to be the onus. He's always going to be that we're going to need 2. And not only are we going to need 2, we got to make sure that there's somebody chip in case he splits the 2, just straight up beats the 2, runs through him, runs around him, because that's exactly what he is. But basically, the whole thing, you're basically hitching yourself to Superman's cape here and trying to get some of the breadcrumbs that come falling off.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no shortage of examples of this where you just have guys play well. Look, the easiest one off the top of my head is always George Edwards when he played on the Vikings defensive line with Jared Allen and the Williams wall, and he got like 8 sacks a year, and then he signed like a $30 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons as that 4th guy. So look, if you can press the pocket and find yourself in position, and you've got Smith and Myles Garrett and Okoronkwo and Tomlinson sort of creating opportunities for you, at some point you're just going to have to just wrap your arms around the quarterback and he's going to go down and you're going to get production. But it also means that if you're the 4th guy, from the Browns standpoint, that they're just better as opposed to needing to be the 3rd or the 2nd guy. It's, the same thing with any position group. The more guys you have, the more guys you can sort of slate up as being problems. I mean, Myles Garrett's going to get double teamed all day. They're going to have to figure out how to deal with Zadarius Smith and Okoronkwo. And you're now one-on-one all the time and you get to make plays. Like it's a great situation for you. And that stuff matters. And the Browns used to be the team that always watched their especially the Steelers and the Ravens sort of like get these guys where it's like, that Zadarius Smith trade would be like, oh, the Ravens got another great player.
Justin Houston, prime example.
And now, the last 2 years, and obviously the Amari Cooper thing was way earlier in the process, but the Zadarius Smith one's like a really good example of a guy where you're like, wow, they even if you didn't believe the Browns were like a good team, you're still going, oh, the Browns got a really good player. In fact, I heard this on some Ravens podcast randomly screaming how pissed they were that the Browns got him because that makes the Browns better, and pissed they were that the Ravens didn't get him because they needed him. So it just becomes a snowball effect. And good when you're a destination, which the Browns are becoming, you're going to get more guys who are interested in what you're doing.
And you look, we can say defensive tackle, and one of the reasons we always bring up a guy like Matt Ioannidis is he can do other things. He can line up outside if he wants, which just creates more of the allure of just putting 4 guys out there, and basically they can all look at each other and say, and let Myles call a shot. All right, I got center gap. Y'all figure out the rest. And there's so many things you can do with it. And, maybe part of it is just the absolute general football fan in Pete and I, but to be able to watch so many guys like this and so many opportunities and so many things that you can do with them. And, the fact that you can rotate in so many different guys, and the Browns could always be fresh, be locked, loaded on the defensive line position. And this is something, and we've talked about this probably since the absolute beginning of this show, and the amount of times we did where are the defensive tackles, where are the defensive tackles, where are the defensive tackles. It's getting better. It's not all the way there yet. We're going to switch it up here. We're going to go to segment 3. Pete Smith, Sports Illustrated Browns Digest, in for the ride. One NAFC North team we have not gotten to look over, under the lens, so to speak, to their draft class. We're going to do that here. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Stick around, folks. Segment 3 on its way. To all the everydayers who make Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Of course, as I always say, you guys are the fabric on which this show is built. Could not be more thankful for you all. So what you need to do, if you're new here, you've been here for the traffic, whether it was the draft, whether it was UDFAs, whether it was the Za'Darius Smith move, I want you to be like the everydayers. Hit subscribe. Notifications on here on the YouTube page, and stick around for a while. 5 shows a week, 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year. Been here since 2017. Audio side, wherever you get your audio podcast, Locked On Browns is always available and always free. Pete, we get to it. The the Pittsburgh Steelers 2023 draft class. You go offensive tackle right out the chute, Broderick Jones. We've mentioned Broderick Jones here already. Obviously, so much heavy influence in the SEC. Everybody's got, basically new rookies coming to their teams, where you've obviously got tape against them, of course, against the University of Georgia boys. Joey Porter out of Penn State. I mean, this one was such an obvious that somehow, some way, Joey Porter was going to end up playing the same for school for his dad. Keanu Benton. I just can't. Love Keanu Benton. Hate it. Then you throw in Darnell Washington, Herbig from Wisconsin as well, Corey Tyson, cornerback out of Purdue, and Spencer Anderson, offensive guard out of Maryland. Pete, this is a draft. I would say first 4 players here, you definitely think these guys are going to be guys who, have a significant role here. Broderick Jones obviously walks in right away to a starting tackle gig. Joey Porter Jr., most likely a starting corner gig. Keanu Benton, this is interesting because they could probably use him in the middle. They could probably use him at a 5 technique if they wanted to. And Darnell Washington, they have Freiermuth. Washington, what he is as an athlete is insane, but he is also that solid of a blocker. This was a really, really nice start for a team that maybe just needed some, players, the skill players, maybe not so much anymore. Maybe you needed more to go around it to see if the skill players are as good as they think they are, and we'll see if they are. But some things to make that work here. Jones Washington is a great setup in that regard. Porter brings a little bit more size to the cornerback position, and Benton, for a team that doesn't need him right off the bat, brings a lot of versatility with his size, with his athleticism, and what he can do in an odd defensive front.
Right. I think this is an identity draft for the Steelers. They get a lot of guys who are big, physical, tough. Broderick Jones is a talented left tackle. He's also, first and foremost, a good run blocker. Keanu Benton's obviously a tough player in the middle. He's going to play that nose. I think he's going to be pretty good out of the gate as when they get into their even front and sub package stuff. Joey Porter Jr. is, talented. I thought, the Steelers traditionally aren't very good at keeping secrets, or at least the league always seems to figure out who they like, and yet the Steelers get them anyway. But for what they want to do, they want big guys who can press. They want to sort of be able to match with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So him and I really like Trice from Purdue. There's a medical question with him, but that's what he is. He's just a big press corner who looks like a linebacker. Darnell Washington, again, it's more that's going to help your run game. A medical question with him, but even if he's nothing but a 6th offensive lineman, he's going to produce value. Maybe Najee Harris can mount 4.0 yards per carry now with all this help. Nick Herbig is just, fits in sort of what they want to do. I have questions whether it's going to work with him or not, or if he's going to end up switching positions, but it's a great shot for that team to take, and he does a lot of things that they like.
So for Herbig, your question is, can he make it as an edge in the Pittsburgh system, or is he going to get kicked inside?
Right. It's whether is he going to be Joe Schobert, which would be a great value, great addition for them. But that's the question, and they need more edge help behind them. I mean, obviously, their top 2 guys, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, are very, very good. But they need more. They need more guys, and it wouldn't surprise me if they signed a veteran at some point. to further that effort. But I think Omar Khan did a really good job in his first draft. I think some of that sort of fell his way, but just the moves that the Steelers have been making throughout this process, the draft and free agency have been really good for his first full year in the gig. That's, not great if you're anyone else in the division. So I think they're in really good hands right off the bat with him.
And look, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is where it's tough because, you look at this and, however the season unfolded last year, if you're looking at it from the Pittsburgh Steelers lens, you're probably the fourth team in this division. So, sometimes it's, you've got to put, brains over basically your eyes, and you got to understand you invested a first round pick in Najee Harris. And now you've heard Pete and I talk about this last couple episodes. You invested a first round pick in this kid, and going into year 3, he does not average more than 4 yards per carry in the NFL. So sometimes you got to use your brain, basically, again, before your heart, before your eyes, and realize, well, what did we do this for if we cannot put this kid in the position to see what we truly believe that he is? If you want to bring in a guy and give him 300 plus yards of carry and just get beat up, dragged to the ground, and get 3.6, 3.7, 3.8 every now and then, break a 20, that's fine. But he's going to be, if your team does develop and starts becoming more successful, what's going to be left to Najee Harris by that point? The point is supposed to, you're supposed to get these Nick Chubb 7, 8s. Everybody gets a -1. We know how this game works. We're foolish. But the point is, the Novocaine approach at the running back position, it's not the best way to go here. And even still, less than 4 yards per carry isn't necessarily the Novocaine approach. 4 yards per carry is the Novocaine approach, which is why you make a move for a Darnell Washington, who is definitely a tight end, but certainly brings a ton as a run blocker. Why you invest with Broderick Jones. And we'll see the way the matchups work out. And we're going to see that, obviously, as soon as week 2, when we see this team. And again, we'll see this team again by game 10 for the Cleveland Browns this year. For Pittsburgh, all of this is great conjecture, I would say, Pete. But I don't know if any of it matters. It all comes down to whether or not Kenny Pickett is the guy they believed he is. If Kenny Pickett is not a guy who was a first-round quarterback, doesn't prove to be a true starting quarterback. And the other thing is a starting quarterback relevant enough to be in the AFC North, where you have Joe Burrow, who's going to be, if not the second highest paid quarterback in the game, with Lamar Jackson, with Deshaun Watson. He's got to prove here in year 2 that he can take the gap a long, long way in as far as catching up to these guys. If not, this draft class doesn't matter what the Pittsburgh Steelers did.
Well, look, I mean, as you mentioned, it's year 3 for Najee Harris. That pick still makes no sense to this day, because if he has a great season, are you going to pick up his 5th-year option? Maybe, but
after 1,200, after 950 to 1,000 carries in his first 3 years,
it's silly. But what they do get is the ability to shrink down the box, play big, which, given what the Browns are boasting with their edge play and some of these other teams, that may be their best path forward to try to protect Kenny Pickett, is to try to load up, put Freiermuth and Denzel Washington or Denzel whatever in Darnell Washington. If you put both those guys in there and you can pound the ball and stay on schedule, then you can sort of mitigate the advantages the Browns have. That could open up some opportunities. But at the same point, the Steelers still have the ability to go wide, to have a bunch of receivers on the field and do that. So it's not different than what the Browns have done with some of their stuff. They like to play that little bit of an accordion setup where you can play as big or as small as you want to cause problems for the defense. But it's all about protecting and trying to advance Kenny Pickett and seeing where that gets you. But I like that draft. I think between that and the things that the Steelers have done, which includes completely overhauling corner, completely overhauling linebacker, and continuing to rebuild that offensive line. They redid the left side, getting Isaac Seumalo at left guard, which should help Broderick Jones. I think you're asking a lot for that to come out and be good initially, but if they can hang in there, I think their team that can make some strides later in the year.
which is behooves the Cleveland Browns, seeing as they play him as early as they do. But look, Kenny Pickett, the facts are facts. He threw as many touchdown passes last year as Deshaun Watson. It's not going to cut it in today's NFL. And we'll see, because it's all down on number 8, obviously, for the Pittsburgh Steelers and what he can do for this team. We got into a ton here today, whether or not, the Browns are still in it. Andrew Berry maybe looking for one final piece. The misconception as to what that final piece should be. And we finally close out our AFC North draft coverage of, basically peeking over the fence here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Browns Digest, SportsIllustrated.com. Pete Smith and team, they do an incredible job over there. Just content every single day, pushing things out. You're getting some great things. I know I want to call him, I hope it's Matt Wilson, right, Matt? I always see Coach Wilson, Matt Wilson, right, Pete? Noah's doing some fantastic job over there. Brandon Little, obviously a huge integral piece over there. So make sure you're checking everything out. Obviously, the podcast Pete does with Bree, always a great show. Make sure you're checking that out. Make sure you're following at Pete Smith _, at _Pete Smith _ as well. Myself, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff _LJ _Lloyd. The show at Locked On Browns. Follow back account, as you guys all know. To the everydayers, again, you guys, you're just amazing. And I suggest to all the new listeners coming through the traffic of the draft, through UDFAs, through the Zadarius Smith trade, be like the everydayers. Subscribe to the Locked On Browns podcast on YouTube. Make sure the notifications are on, so when the content drops, you guys are there to absorb it. Audio side, wherever you get your audio podcasts, we are always available, always free. Make sure you search Locked On Browns. All that being said, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go, Browns.